Hot off the heels of a major press conference earlier today with Gary Bettman that assured Jets fans that the team was staying in Winnipeg, guess what? The Jets decided to honor home ice with a big victory against the St. Louis Blues. Find out how on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Evening, Jets fans, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you enjoy what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. It's awesome. We appreciate that you sit down and spend some time with us each day to talk about the Jets. And obviously, Winnipeg just had a pretty momentous day earlier with, not only the press conference and fireside chat, but Winnipeg also just won yet again, 4th straight win, this one coming against a Central Division rival that is trying to climb further up the standings and get back into the playoff picture in the St. Louis Blues. But of course, the Jets come away 4-2 victors. Big game for Laurent Brossoit, big game for the Jets in general, and we'll get into the details and nitty-gritty of what you might want to know about this game in just a moment. Before we go any further, though, just want to let you know tonight's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your very first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Now, circling back to the Jets, Winnipeg just had a very big day in a lot of senses, right? The team, after the conversation with Bettman, it's been made pretty clear that the Jets aren't moving. That's not going to happen. Business-wise, there's obviously some stuff to sort out. Whether Bettman says there is or isn't, I think it's pretty obvious that corporate sales and partnerships are a point of concern for True North, but not something to where, the attendance is gonna be the nail in the coffin for this team. So I guess we can rest assured that, the team's not going anywhere. I think, for me personally, I felt like that was going to be the case anyways. We just wanted to hear it from Bettman confirmed, and that seems to be pretty firmed up. So, as fans are really starting to pack the stadium again, it's nice to know that folks are back invested. I think the team has done a much better job recently of, just making some minor tweaks to the overall fan experience, drawing more folks in. And, I think the team itself not sucking for once has also really gotten fans energized about the experience again. So, everyone's kind of bought in, if we're being honest. I think that's a big thing. It's nice to see, more and more sellouts this season after we didn't really see that many last year. So, the Jets, they're kind of in good straits. The vibes are still relatively high. I think that's kind of been the theme of the Rick Bowness era so far is vibes, right? Fueled by passion, fueled by vibes. That's the Winnipeg Jets for you. And of course, they had a big game where they were powered by more than just vibes in this one against the St. Louis Blues. Now, the Blues recently have been in an interesting run of form where there's been a little bit of a mixed bag from them. They can either dominate opponents and win like 6-1 and also get smoked like 4-0, and you don't really know what you're getting with them on a consistent basis. But I will say that what I didn't expect was this to be a very high-tempo, fast game, but that's kind of what we got. I would say that this was a relatively high-event evening where the Jets generally owned most of the best chances, right? You saw lines 2 through 4 really cook, although the third line had a bit of a mixed bag start. They eventually kind of came around and got back to it. The rest of the depth units really took over. I think the 91 line with Nemesnikov really had a great evening. The second line with Monahan and Ehlers, which we'll talk about later, that unit cooked. The only line that struggled but still managed to score anyways was the Scheifele line, which is kind of funny because I feel like every night that we talk about in these days, they're rocking like a 25 or 35 expected goals percentage share. But thankfully, because they have such elite high-end shooting talent, they've been able to at least contribute on the score sheet because otherwise it's looking pretty rough, right? They don't defend well at all. And offensively, because they spend so much time in their own end of the ice, you don't see a lot of what makes their skill special further up the ice. So that at some point they're going to want to fix that, because I feel like that's going to kind of get them in some trouble at some point. I don't know when, but I feel like you can only live beyond your means with that line struggling as much as it does at even strength for so long. Another funny thing, the power play actually did not score and looked pretty bad this evening. It is what it is. You're going to have nights where the special teams don't exactly inspire a lot of confidence, but after a recent hot run of form where I think the power play was, 8 for 16 last 4 or 5 games, a little bit sucky to see them not really get much setup at all, which was a bit of a surprise. I thought the Jets would be able to get a little bit more going against St. Louis, but it seems like the Blues had Winnipeg's number, at least on the PK. At even strength, generally speaking, like I said, the Jets, second through fourth lines rolled pretty well for much of the evening. The only exception was like the Lowry line, which took a while to get going. Eventually, though, they started to stabilize, and we even saw some really good high-danger chances created by guys like Niederreiter on some backdoor feeds that just very nearly missed. Again, I also wanted to highlight, I think, Perfetti's line with Nemesnikov. Both he and Nemesnikov had really strong games. Vlad was everywhere, creating chances right in the slot, forcing turnovers, and Perfetti had a couple of really good feeds that almost paid off with some great plays. Perfetti honestly almost had a goal himself. This one was just deflected wide, and then he set up a slot chance right in the crease for Niederreiter. Niederreiter unfortunately could not capitalize on that one, but again, really close. Or that might have been Ehlers. There was a couple of good chances from some line shifts and changes and stuff where guys were kind of coming on and off the ice. So a little hard to remember those moment-to-moment instances. But overall, I would say, there were some really good signs from some of the Jets, like depth players, right? And then you could kind of see Iafallo finally breaking through on the score sheet. That was nice. Dylan had his 7th goal of the season, 6th or 7th this year. Which I think his career high is 8, something like that. So he's really, really close, 1 or 2 goals off. He's been, a really rock steady presence, and his pairing with Pionk this evening had a very nice outing. Really not too many things to quibble with other than a couple of perhaps grade A chances given up by the top line. And the Schmidt-Sandberg pairing had a rough night. That was probably one of the few things where you'd notice it, right? Because Sandberg and Schmidt usually very, very rock solid. This evening, they had one of their worst outings in recent memory, which, again, it's really rare. You don't really see that from them. So I'm sure they'll stabilize and be fine in the next game. But just one of those weird games where it seems like both guys were a fair step behind. So, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if somehow Stanley draws back in, because I know the team is also probably trying to showcase Logan for a trade, but we'll see how that goes. All told, though, big win for the Jets. Again, 4th straight win, which is nice. Brossoit had a huge outing in this game. He stopped 36 of 38. Great performance from our backup goalie, who's proven that now that he can kind of eat some more starts for Helly, this could be a chance for the Jets to start giving Hellebuck a few more nights off the next couple of weeks, because March is going to be super busy, and Brossoit has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that he can handle probably a good increased workload. I mean, he's rocking like a 920 so far this year, and he's looked every bit the part of that Sterling backup that we wanted when he departed. So overall, great game. I'm pretty happy about the result, and I think a lot of you should be too. Now, all that said, there is one particular combo that I think is really worth spotlighting, and that is the new hookup and link up between Ehlers and Monahan. I think there's something really special brewing there. We'll talk about what has worked really well for this duo and whether Monahan is really finally starting to arrive for the Jets in just a moment. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Sleeper. It's past the halfway point in the season, and obviously the Jets have had all sorts of success. It's been, a bit of an uneven past month or two, but overall, right, the Jets are still very much on the winning side of the ledger. Things are looking up, and Winnipeg is just shy of the Central Division lead. They probably own it now, pending the result of the Stars game, and that is pretty fun. But regardless of where the team is in the standings, I want to remind you that you could personally win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you could win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. For those of you who love tracking player stats, whether it's the save percentage of top goalies like Hellebuck and Sorokin and Shesterkin, or maybe you track the number of hits dished out by players like Rempe, who's apparently gotten in more fights than he has actual NHL ice time, it's a great time for you to really make use of that knowledge, because if you can beat Sleeper's projections, whether it's more or less than what they're expecting for a given game, guess what? You could win big. And if you get 8 of those stats categories correct for a given game, you could win 100 times your bet on Sleeper. That's right, 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your very first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us. On tonight's episode, we're just walking through some major takeaways from a big Jets win over the St. Louis Blues. Wasn't like the most Picasso-esque game, I guess. There were some minor blemishes and things that you could probably nitpick, but overall, big game from the Jets. Really nice performance, and I really can't complain about too much. And I thought there were some actually cool things that we've started to see more and more consistently. I want to talk about the Perfetti-Monahan, or the Ehlers-Monahan link up in particular, because I feel like 27 and 23 starting to connect and really find some chemistry is going to be great for this team long term, especially if that's a duo that continues to heat up the way that they've been doing so far the past couple of games. Before we get into that, though, just wanted to let you know something really cool the Locked On Network has done. We have launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and we're now available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with our local experts and our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Now, like I said, the Jets coming off the heels of a big win and now a 4th straight victory against a couple of teams that are perhaps below them in the standings, but still, at least in St. Louis's case, still pushing for a playoff spot. It's an interesting state for the Jets, right? Because you could say the recent slate of opponents hasn't exactly been the strongest, but all the same, you still got to take care of business, and the Jets have done just that. And the Blues, I thought, were actually a legitimately solid team, right? The recent run of form under Bannister has been good, relatively speaking, and this game was very high event, and so it was a good showcase for some of Winnipeg's new line combos, one of which, unfortunately, didn't exactly do super well. We know that the top line has kind of been getting caved in most of these games. I've spent a lot of time talking about that. I instead wanted to focus on the new partnership with Ehlers and Monahan. I feel like this duo has really started to cook. We saw it lead to a beautiful goal from Monahan this evening. Ehlers set up a perfect opportunity, great goal, and then Ehlers had another beautiful assist. This one kind of like, I think it was like a missed shot, but it ended up being a pass, almost like a pass off the backboards that Iafallo managed to tuck behind Hofer, and it made it like 4-2 for the Jets. Overall, I just think that the way that this line plays together has been really impressive. And I think one of the biggest reasons that Monahan has started to find his groove, especially scoring-wise, is because he doesn't have to be the bus driver. With Montreal, you know that his role was probably a little more than you would want to ask of him usually, right? He had to be one of the top scorers, one of the top performers, and he got a lot of ice time because of it. With the Jets now, he can actually be more of a complementary player, right? A guy who slides in behind somebody else who's doing, the space creation, which in Monahan's case allows him to use a pretty excellent shot along with very smart positional awareness. I feel like as he started to kind of get on the same page with Nick and get a better sense of where he and Iafallo are kind of rotating and moving about, it's led to him finding more and more soft areas between defenders where he's gotten off some really dangerous shots. He's liking himself, I think, in that slot area where he's pulled off a couple of great shots. He had another chance, I think, on the power play that very nearly connected, just missed. I think the puck just kind of fell behind him a little bit. Otherwise, he was primed for a one-timer and might have honestly scored. I feel like he's making a living there, And that has really been a blessing for him. And honestly, the narrative, I joked, I think maybe a couple of episodes ago, that at some point the narrative is probably going to be that the Jets only paid a first for Monahan. I think he might be past that point at this rate. He's looking like a great pickup for the Jets. Had his first assist as well, which was nice. But overall, just I feel like I've noticed him more in the past couple of games. And I feel like, again, because Ehlers does so much of the space creation and leads a lot of that transition and stuff, draws all of that attention to himself, it opens up players like Monahan who can become a really good poacher and facilitator to take advantage of those opportunities. I think Andrew Berkshire talked about Monahan being a really good fit for this Jets team. I was a little bit skeptical, I felt, because Monahan's defensive game was something that didn't really stand out when he was with Montreal. And I feel like with the Jets, I haven't exactly noticed it, but because he's doing well to slot in offensively and provide that sort of centering, finishing support down in the slot area, it's kind of not been an issue, right? As long as he keeps doing what he's doing so far, he's been both effective at even strength and on the power play. That's really all I would want to ask of him. He's been really heating up recently. I think he's got like 5 or 6 goals in his last few games. That's fantastic news for the Jets because that was honestly the one thing that I really expected him to do. Although perhaps not as in great volume as he's showing, right? He's almost on the verge of 20 goals for, I think, the first time in his career, or maybe the first time in several years. He hasn't done this in a while, if he has done it previously. So that's great for him. I know that, it's been a bit of an up and down struggle the past several years to find a spot to really settle in and earn, a full-time role with the team. So good for Monahan. I'm curious to know if he sticks around after this year. Obviously, the Jets are going to have not a lot of roster spots, but if he wants to come back and he was willing to take a relatively bargain price deal, maybe he sticks around and kind of provides a nice middle six option. I don't want to say we should commit to that, but hey, if he does well for the Jets, maybe it's an option worth exploring, especially if he kind of starts finding his stride and really fitting in alongside Ehlers and stuff. I hate to say it, but because he's so good at faceoffs and because Bones does seem to trust him a lot, this might be the best way to get Ehlers more shifts, which is stupid to say, but you know what? Sometimes you have to kind of work within the constraints and know what your coaching staff is going to do. And so far, it's kind of paid dividends for the Jets. So a great pairing, great to see them really find some chemistry. If you make an upgrade on that right side with Iafallo maybe getting bumped back down into the bottom 6 where he can be a more stabilizing defensive presence, and you find somebody like, say, a player that we're about to talk about in just a moment in Pavel Buchnevich, well, maybe you are going to have yourself a real dandy second line, maybe even a top line. I know. I'll try and not crap on the first line as much as possible, but we all know the first line is probably not the best line on this team, despite the scoring talent. So stuff to consider, but I think if you're a Jets fan right now is feeling pretty optimistic overall. Now, like I said, I wanted to talk about Pavel Buchnevich in particular because we saw some good stuff from him in this game, and I think it's worth exploring why he'd be one of the few players that I'd be willing to sell a little bit more of the farm for if he is available to Winnipeg. But of course, that's relying on a few things, and we'll talk about what all of that might entail in just a moment. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Camino Consulting. You've heard of Camino's online families and couple courses, and maybe you've even taken advantage of our special Locked On 25% discount running to the end of the month. But if you're looking for more and you're interested in live seminars, now is the time to get in on the action. In both sports and business, the challenge in differentiating candidates and recruits is an endless battle. Everyone can demonstrate their measurables and qualifications, but we know the intangibles are where it's really at. And you know what? Finding that connection and understanding somebody at a deeper level and really getting a sense for who they are and whether or not they fit your organization can be a really big challenge. You should contact Camino Consulting for their team and management seminars to get a peek behind the curtain and watch your next recruiting class or hiring group become one of the most effective you've ever seen. If you've identified the right candidates and you've learned all the important lessons on how to communicate, you can get them to be more motivated and get them rolling in the right direction and executing the vision that fits your organization. Even if you're not in business management or working with a team, of course, you can refer others. They accept paid referrals. And if you can find somebody who would really benefit from Camino services, be sure to send them Camino's way, and they will reward you for your efforts, because every group works better together when they are collaborating and working all towards the same goals. So contact Camino Consulting at caminoconsulting.ca and get on the fast track to better management performance. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode, as we are just wrapping up really quickly with some thoughts on bringing in a major upgrade for the Jets. I know Winnipeg is playing it very cool right now. We haven't really heard a lot about who they're interested in, and obviously that just leads to a lot of speculation, right? What players might the Jets be interested in bringing in? We've heard something about a top six winger being discussed internally, but obviously with the Jets perhaps a little bit loath to trade a lot of futures, especially with Monahan taking away their first this year already, the Jets might be looking to kind of maybe do a bit of bargain bin shopping when it comes to a top six option. If they are willing to spend a bit more, though, and they're willing to perhaps part with a major prospect or two, this might be the best opportunity ever to get in on Pavel Buchnevich. Now, you saw Buchnevich in this Blues game, right? And what did you take away from it? I think if there's anything you should know about Pavel, it's that he's one of the most dangerous forwards on that St. Louis team, and quite frankly, one of the top scorers in the league in general. Pavel is so skilled at attacking space, finding expert shooting lanes, and getting open into those really dangerous areas around the faceoff circles, where his excellent release and vision and spatial awareness really take over. And he's also just really effective in possession in general. He can get up the ice in a pretty decent speed. You know, you're not going to see like crazy Ehlers level transition out of him, but he's certainly no stick in the mud, right? The dude is super skilled, super effective. He's been one of the Blues' best players this year. I was a big fan of him when he was in New York. I always felt like he was really underutilized and, quite frankly, underappreciated. And with like a year and a half left on his deal, you know, for me, Butch is probably one of those guys that I would be banging the table to bring in. This year, he's just hovering a little bit under a point per game. And, you know, with him having had over a point per game the last couple of seasons, you know, I really feel like Buchnevich would be a fantastic fit for this Jets team. He would be super versatile. You could pretty much do anything you want with him, whether it's using him on the top line, the second line, or in your middle six. You put him with Ehlers and Monahan, I think he's absolutely going to cook. And it's going to give the Jets a ton of versatility. He's also going to be a really effective presence on the power play. And with his finishing talent that he's just unbelievably blessed with, again, you know, I'm looking for a guy who's really going to move the needle for the Jets. Buchnevich might be one of your best chances at getting a player who does that and also gives you at least one more season to work with, right? That's why I feel like he's going to cost a bit more. So if you do Montreal's second, next year's first round pick, a Barlow, maybe you look at, a Lambert. I would prefer not to touch some of those guys, but, you know, at some point, if the Jets really are serious about winning now, you might have to start considering it a little bit more seriously. I know I saw one person, was it Mark, I think, who mentioned something about maybe doing Perfetti in that deal. I think we can skip that. I don't think you need to move Perfetti right now. I think Cole, you know, he's having some struggles recently, and I think he's a little bit in the coaching doghouse, but I promise you, if you trade him now, you are going to absolutely regret that in a few seasons. Cole is one of those guys who's going to be a really pivotal player for this team in the very near future, perhaps as soon as, say, this season. So I'd prefer to really not trade him. I think he's one of our most secret weapons, especially for the near term and the longer term. So let's avoid that. But Barlow, I think, would be a little bit more expendable because while he's a fantastic prospect, he's a little bit more distant, I think, for the Jets. And honestly, you know, Winnipeg has one of the deeper prospect pipelines in the NHL, which is not something we could say the past few years. But now that they've got McCrory, Lambert, Barlow, Lucius, Salamance, and some other, good players, although they have a super secret elite prospect in Chibrikov that a lot of people don't seem to be all that aware of. This pool is deep. Obviously not on the defensive side of things, but certainly up front. A lot of good prospects, a lot of talent to work with. And so this could be a good chance to see if the Blues might be willing to do another Stastny-like thing and surprise the league with a huge acquisition. Again, this is a big one, and I do think Buchnevich has some sort of modified no trade or no movement clause. I don't exactly know what the terms are and if the Jets are perhaps on some sort of list. So if he does have that and if he's willing to waive, you'd better start talking to the Blues right now, and I'm sure the Jets have already considered that. But it does seem like right now the Jets are really focused on the Flyers. If that's the case, we're probably not going to see a Buchnevich-level return. Maybe the Jets go for Sean Walker and Scott Lawton or something. Would really prefer it just to be Walker in this case. Lawton's fine, but probably would cost more assets than the Jets really need to part with. But, at least in the locker room, Lawton would be a really cool fit. So, can't really complain too much. But say if the Jets really do take that home run swing, let's just hope that Buchnevich might be in that conversation. Because, again, if you're looking for a needle mover and somebody who can push this team from being a really quality contender to potentially a favorite amongst the pack of really talented teams, this might be the time to do it. The Jets have the best goalie in the league who's having the best season of his career. This team is playing at an elite defensive level overall, despite the first-line struggles. And the Jets aren't really going to have many playing fields that are as level and as favorable as this season. So let's hope the Jets make the right decision and come up with a big trade to shock us all. Let me know what you want the Jets to do in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Tomorrow, we'll probably spend some time talking about Winnipeg versus Dallas because that is setting up to be a really big game on the 29th. It'll be a road game, and the Jets have yet to beat Dallas so far this year. Maybe this time, just maybe, we come out with a big victory because the Stars are leaking a little bit. They're not as good as they used to be with the goaltending situation being a little bit of a question mark. So if the Jets can find a way past Dallas and really start to solidify a hold on that top Central Division spot, you know what I'm thinking. We want that division banner trophy. So let's hope for a big Central Division win and, hopefully bigger and better things at the end of this regular season. But like I said, that is all the time that we have for this evening. Thanks so much for listening and making us your first listen of the day. We will see you back here tomorrow with even more Winnipeg Jets coverage. So see you tomorrow. Have a great night and go Jets go.